Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into the ultimate historical cold case file. We're going to peel back the layers on the facts, the hard evidence, and the massive cultural impact of the mystery we all know as Jack the Ripper.
So just to set the stakes right at the top for us, how exactly did an unidentified killer from 1888 change modern media and society forever? This wasn't just some brutal crime spree. It was an event that literally altered the course of history. It reshaped how we consume news and how society handles extreme poverty. And really, that's the core mystery we're unpacking today.
Let's start with a clear definition here. Jack the Ripper is actually just a pseudonym. It's the name given to an unidentified serial killer who murdered at least 5 women in the deeply impoverished Whitechapel district of London way back in 1888. Because the killer was never actually caught, these crimes remain one of the world's absolute most enduring historical mysteries.
Section 1. The Canonical 5. Grounding the mystery in tragically real victims.
So the crucial thing to understand first is the distinction between the broader police investigation and the specific work of this one serial killer. Now, the official police investigation at the time was called the Whitechapel murders, and it actually looked at 11 different deaths between 1888 and 1891. But historians today generally agree that 5 specific women out of those 11 were killed by the exact same hand. And these 5 victims are what historians call the canonical 5. The terror starts with Mary Ann Nichols on August 31, 1888, followed pretty quickly by Annie Chapman on September 8th. Then we get to September 30th, which is often called the double event, where both Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were murdered on the exact same night. And finally, Mary Jane Kelly on November 9th. All 5 of these women were sex workers, just trying to survive in the absolute slums of London's East End, which made them incredibly vulnerable targets.
Moving on to Section 2, the clues, modus operandi, and infamous letters.
The killer's methods, their modus operandi, followed a very distinct, absolutely chilling pattern. Step 1, the victims' throats were slashed first to prevent any screaming. Step 2 involved severe abdominal mutilation after death. And Step 3, which is probably the most revealing, was the surgical removal of internal organs, specifically the uterus and kidneys, from 3 of the victims. Because of this terrifying precision, police were led to believe the killer had to be a surgeon, a butcher, or a midwife, basically someone with real anatomical knowledge.
Now, during the height of the panic, the public reaction was just overwhelming. The media and local authorities received literally hundreds of letters. You had people claiming to be the killer, people offering tips, the whole 9 yards. But out of those hundreds, historians really focus on 3 that truly stand out in shaping the case. Let's take a look at them.
First up is the Dear Boss letter. This one is incredibly famous because it's the actual source of the name Jack the Ripper. But here is the really fascinating twist. Most historians today actually believe this letter was a complete hoax. It was most likely written by ambitious journalists looking to sensationalize the story and boost their newspaper sales. They literally branded the killer to sell more papers. Crazy, right? And then right after that came the Saucy Jack postcard, which taunted the police about the double murder of Stride and Eddowes. But the third piece of correspondence is arguably the most chilling of all, the From Hell letter. This one wasn't sent to the media. It was sent directly to George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. And get this, it wasn't just a letter. It arrived with a cardboard box containing half of a preserved human kidney. Medical experts at the time believed it matched the organ taken from the victim, Catherine Eddowes.
Section 3, the prime suspects, examining the cold case files. So over 100 suspects have been proposed over the last century. We're talking everyone from local butchers to famous painters. But to cut through all that noise, we're going to narrow it down to the most prominent historical targets.
Out of that massive list, 3 historical targets stand out the most. First, we have Aaron Kosminski. He was a Polish barber living right there in Whitechapel, and he was actually institutionalized shortly after the murder stopped. What's wild is that modern DNA testing on a shawl linked to Catherine Eddowes pointed to him, though I definitely should note the scientific community heavily disputes those results. Next up is Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher. He tragically drowned himself in the River Thames in December 1888, which perfectly aligns with the sudden, unexplained end of the killings. Finally, we have Michael Ostrogon, a Russian con man and thief with a history of mental illness who is actively flagged by the original investigators as a potential match.
Now, aside from those primary suspects, there is some deeply fascinating cultural lore surrounding this whole case. A bunch of alternative theories have popped up over the years, including this highly sensational idea of a royal cover-up. This theory actually proposes that Queen Victoria's own grandson, Prince Albert Victor, was somehow involved, and that the entire might of the British Empire was used to hide his crimes.
Another incredibly compelling alternative is the Jill the Ripper theory. This one suggests the killer wasn't a man at all, but a female midwife. Remember that anatomical knowledge we discussed earlier? A midwife would absolutely have it. Furthermore, it logically explains how someone could walk right through the crowded, heavily policed streets of London covered in blood without raising any suspicion. I mean, a bloody apron on a midwife wouldn't have made a Victorian police officer look twice.
And that brings us to Section 4, a lasting cultural legacy, the ripple effects of 1888.
This single case produced two massive yet entirely different societal outcomes. On one hand, it marked a huge turning point in modern history by pioneering the sensationalized true crime media coverage we see everywhere today. Basically, the press learned that panic and morbid curiosity sold papers. But on the flip side, this intense media spotlight also exposed the horrific, practically unlivable conditions of London's East End to the wealthy public who had, up until then, completely ignored it.
So the crucial takeaway here is that a tangible social good did eventually emerge from this immense tragedy. The widespread, almost obsessive media coverage essentially forced wealthy Londoners and politicians to finally acknowledge the extreme poverty happening right in their own backyard. And this direct exposure prompted significant, much-needed social housing reforms in the decades that followed.
So, what does this all mean for us today? With disputed modern DNA and century-old cold case files, will the true identity of Jack the Ripper ever be definitively proven? Or is the mystery itself, the unending debate, the theories, the dark reflection of Victorian society, what truly keeps the legend alive today? It's a fascinating intersection of myth and history, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring these clues for yourself. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today, and I'll catch you on the next one.